and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 311, and today's date is March 11th, 2014, and the title of this episode is U.S. Electrical Grid Attacks Could Wipe Out Power Across the Country. Now, there was a report that was just issued in the state of New Jersey, and we're going to go into that a little bit later in this report. But before I get started, I just want to welcome all those new people who subscribed on YouTube. Welcome to the X22 Report. If you haven't visited the X22report.com site, you can come on over. I have many different tabs. I put up articles during the day. I comment on these articles, and I do track products. I have a high-level view of the timeline of the economic collapse. You can also go to the people. This is a forum of like-minded people, and they're talking about the economic collapse and many other different issues. It costs absolutely nothing to join. All you need is your email, and you can join. And if you're a little hesitant, which I completely understand, you can just go to the forum, look what people are saying, and just read what they're saying. It is completely free to do that. You do not have to join if you do not want to. And again, you can listen to me on the X22report.com site. I usually post the audio version between 5 and 7, and then I compile it and upload it to YouTube. So you have a choice. You can wait for YouTube or just come to the site, depending on how your day is going and the time that you have. Let's get into the economic collapse news, and we're going to head out to Italy at this time. And what we're seeing is Italy was doing the same thing as the U.S. They were going to other countries looking for tax money. They're looking for revenue, because as we know, all of these countries have debt that cannot be sustained. It's just impossible. And as they continually push down on the people, and they keep pushing austerity on the people, people are not working, people are hungry, people can't survive, and they are not bringing in revenue to the government, and the governments continually bring in more debt. So right now, the Italian lawmakers have put the brakes on a plan to fast-track a partial amnesty for tax dodgers with assets stashed abroad after they expressed concern the cost and bureaucracy could discourage people from owning up, a governmental official said on Tuesday. The idea behind the amnesty was to favor a return of assets to Italy ahead of an agreement with Switzerland, which is still being negotiated, for it to open up its bank database to Italian tax authorities. Lawmakers estimate that as much as 250 billion euros in Italy assets reside outside the country. And the United States is doing the same thing. They have the FATCA law. They're going across the globe. They are trying to find those people who have a U.S. passport but might work in another country, and they're going to find those people and get their money, because they need more revenue to come into the government to pay for this incredible amount of debt, the incredible amount of social programs, and all the aid that we're sending to other countries. And it cannot be sustained on the revenue within the United States, because, as we all know, most of the people are out of work, and we know that because of unemployment is so high. Not the fake numbers they're giving us of 6.6% or 6.7%, and went up a little bit. It is completely the ability. What they need to do is they need to find the money, and they thought they had this with Obamacare, and they're seeing that Obamacare is not doing what it's supposed to do. And this is why you're seeing a lot of climate change news. This is why all the government officials out there are talking about climate change, because what they want to do is they want to put taxes on everything. How much energy you use, when you fill up at the gas tank. This is why there are smart meters on your homes. They completely monitor everything that you do, and those people who use more energy will be taxed more. And this is exactly what this is all about. It's all about bringing in more money to sustain their debt that they created, and also to sustain the central bankers' control around the world. And this is why we are seeing this all happen at this time. Now, here in the United States, wholesale sales collapse most in 5 years. Now, again, they're going to blame everything on the weather like they always do. It's always the weather that's the problem. And again, the entire country does not receive snow all at the same time. Yes, there are certain parts that are warmer and colder, but they're making it seem like the entire country was wiped out because of all these snowstorms and nobody can do anything. Well, the South was fine, the Midwest was fine at times when the Northeast wasn't. So realistically, this weather thing is not really fitting into the economic model here. They just use it as an excuse, and people go, oh yeah, the weather, that's right, I heard about a storm, and this is what they do. But wholesale sales dropped by 1.9%, and this is the worst since 1993. Inventory's sales ratio surged to its highest in 11 months. And again, remember back in December and in January when the automobile industry, they were channel stuffing the dealerships. They had 114 days worth of autos on the dealership lots, and they were using discounts and anything they possibly could do to get rid of these cars because there was so much inventory on the dealers' lots, and they were even giving loans away to subprime borrowers. And again, this whole purpose of this is to show that to manipulate the numbers. Manufacturing is up, but then now here we have a problem with all this inventory on the lots. And again, you cannot manipulate everything because it turns up in other places, and we're seeing this happen right now. Again, we see this happening all over and in the economy. We see it in the retail sector. We see that people do not have work and they don't have the disposable income, and since they do not have the disposable income, they're not going to go out shopping. That's pretty much it. And if they're not going to go out shopping, stores are not going to make it, and this is why we see stores closing. This is why we see Staples closing, JCPenney, Macy's. We're seeing a lot of stores close. And now clothing retailer Ashley Stewart plans to close 27 stores. And again, as we go throughout this year, we are going to see many more store closings. It's inevitable, because what we are seeing is that the jobs are not out there. Now, in a good economy, the youth would finish college or they get out of high school, they go find work, they find work out of college, and they would start their lives. They would start bringing in income. They would have disposable income. Even if they were living with their parents, they'd be able to pay their student loans. They would have a little bit of extra money. They would go out and buy a TV for their room, or a game center, or clothing, or a car, and we are not seeing this at this time, and the youth are not supporting the future economy of the United States. And actually what's happening is we're seeing a lot of layoffs, and just from January to the end of February, we have seen tens of thousands of people slated to be laid off in major corporations. Again, where are all these people going to go? Most of these people have been making very good incomes, and now they're going to have to go look and find jobs in their field, and it's going to be very difficult to find this type of work. And I know many people here in where I am now in New York and in many different areas. They're trying to find work. Again, they got laid off and they were making a certain amount of money. They've been applying to different places and the salaries are much lower, and other people, they don't even get a response when they send their resumes out. But we can see other companies that are laying off now. Zurich Insurance Group, 800 globally. Sessa Sterlite, up to 1,000 internationally. So more and more people are losing work, and we see thousands upon thousands of layoffs coming up. And we're going to see a lot more in the financial industry coming up very soon. Now, the latest JOLT numbers are out, and they expected 4.015, and they received 3.97, and it was completely disappointing, and they expected it to be a lot higher, and this is not helping the employment sector. And again, the labor force of youths, these are young adults ranging from 20 to 29, what we are seeing right now is that their participation rate has dropped. They haven't seen the participation rate so low since 1981. So right now, the Bureau of Labor Statistics started releasing employment data on people in the full age bracket of 20 through 29, and there's about 10.5 million Americans aged 20 to 29 who are not in the labor force in 2013. This is the highest ever recorded by the BLS. Again, this is the future of the United States. If they cannot find work, we have a major problem. And guess what? The government knows this. This is why they created DHS. This is why they installed the NDAA. This is why they have the Patriot Act. This is why NSA has been spying on every single person, because they need to put everyone in a group. They got to make sure who is a threat to their power, and this is why they've been creating lists. And this is why the DHS wants to create this real ID system to keep track of every single person. If you don't know what the real ID system is, this is where every single state has to be in compliance with DHS, and they will send your license information, which will include DNA, iris scan, fingerprint. Your license will be fitted with an RFID chip so they can track you. All this information will be sent to a federal database. This federal database will then be used by all the states, by the federal government, and your information will also be used in Canada and in Mexico so they can track you leaving the country. And of course at all airports and all these different checkpoints. And again, we have to remember they've set up according to DHS and the U.S. government, a 100-mile constitutional free zone, which really doesn't exist because there's no such thing. But if a lot of people believe that exists, it will. They are going to set up checkpoints, and they're going to use this Real ID system to make sure that you are you. They'll be able to track you because most people carry their licenses wherever they go, and they will know exactly where you are. Now, of course, they understand that the economy is not going to make it. They realize this, and this is why they've been putting all these laws into place. It's very odd to have these type of laws, because why would you need them? The only reason you would need them is to control the population. And right now, global growth forecast, what they're saying is the global growth forecast is going to remain sluggish. And there was an international economic body that said, which is a warning on Tuesday, that the global economy around the world is going to be very sluggish. It also warned that the dip in growth in the U.S. over the winter could have longer-lasting repercussions. If the recent economic weakness were to durably depress confidence, it could undermine the recovery. So you're trying to tell me the months of January, February, when we had those couple of snowstorms, it is going to completely derail the recovery. When, again, yes, we've had bad weather, but it didn't hit every single state. And it was only for a day or two each time. They weren't wiped out for 3 weeks at a time. So they're trying to make you believe that because of the weather, the economy might not make it. They're trying to shift blame to other places, and we see this. And again, they understand that the economy is not going to do well. This is why there was a report out there about Homeland Security pre-staging a domestic military force, and most of us know this. We already know that DHS has been working with local law enforcement. They have been giving them, assault weapons, uniforms. They've been training them, and again, these local law enforcements have to be in compliance with DHS, and DHS will have full control of all these local law enforcement departments. But the U.S. Army has announced that it is giving 13,000 of these tanks to Department of Homeland Security, which they're going to spread out through the country to the local law enforcement. Now let me ask you, why would a local law enforcement in a small town need a 20-ton tank, a mine-resistant ambush-protected truck? These were built specifically to save U.S. soldiers from roadside bombs in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. What type of criminals are out there that are using this type of technology that we need tanks in small towns? It makes no sense whatsoever. The reason why they need it: for mass riots, for people who are angry, for people who want this government gone. This is why all of this is being put into place. And we have to remember, over the many years, and again, the government and all these agencies, they do everything in an incremental phase. They don't do everything at once. And what we've been seeing over the years is that we've been desensitized. We were getting people, they got people used to seeing military hardware on local roadways, which we have seen. We've seen DHS procuring nearly about 2 billion rounds of ammo. Checkpoints to travel within our country have been set up. And again, they're going to use these real IDs. They're just getting us used to all of this. We've seen paramilitary civilian police forces. We've seen mass surveillance of all citizens. We've seen political elite above the law and the intimidation of the press. They have been doing this slowly all along to get us used to what is coming. But then again, as we all know, what is coming is always going to be a lot worse than what we think. And we have to remember what Barack Obama said. And this is a quote from him: "We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded." Why? To control the American people. DHS is the anti-terrorism force. Who are the terrorists? You, the American people. This is why DHS has been created. This is why there are fusion centers. This is why they are this is why they're setting up a complete surveillance grid all across the country to monitor and to track every single person, because they need to know where everyone is. And when everything starts to collapse and people are running scared, they don't know what to do, they have the FEMA camps, they have the lists, and this is what it is all about. Okay, now we understand that we're having a huge crisis in Ukraine. There's a crisis in Libya, there's a crisis in Iraq, there's a crisis in Africa, there's a crisis everywhere around the globe here. And right now, the UN Security Council held a 5th meeting on the situation in Ukraine over a period of 10 days. And this reminds me of the Geneva II talks with President Assad. And again, the U.S. central bankers had one agenda, that was to replace Assad. So guess what? Those talks went nowhere. Well, the UN Security Council, these talks went absolutely nowhere. There was absolutely no progress in it whatsoever. And Russia is out there that they're very worried about weapons, ammunition, all being stolen from the military depots, and they don't know where any of this is. And again, yesterday I mentioned that the portable surface-to-air missile systems are missing, and Russia wants to know what has happened to all of this. And they're also very concerned about the U.S. central bankers, EU, looting the country, removing the gold. And the U.S. has not answered any of the questions that were put forth to them, and they're saying, what is going on here? This gold is for the people. Where did it go? Now, we have to remember that during the Syrian crisis and the Geneva II talks, the United States put a document out there for humanitarian aid, and they gave it to the UN Security Council, and the Russians read it over, and they said, no, we're not going to go along with this. We will veto this draft because in this document, it says that Assad has committed war crimes. This is why they need humanitarian aid, and it doesn't prove anything. It's in there, and people are going to misinterpret this. Well, the United States gave a proposal to the Russian government at this time, and the Russians have said the U.S. proposal to resolve the crisis in Ukraine are based on an assumed conflict between Moscow and Kiev, and that is something with which the Russian government cannot agree upon. The U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry last Friday handed the paper to Lavrov, and there is a concept in the document that we are not quite happy with, because everything has been formulated as though there is some kind of conflict between Russia and Ukraine, as though we admit certain facts really exist. And again, this is a little trick that they play. We've seen it in the Geneva II. We saw it in the UN Council draft for humanitarian aid. And again, this is what they're trying to do, because again, we have to remember the whole Ukraine fiasco was a coup. They spent $5 billion to overthrow the government of Ukraine and to put in their own puppet regime that they've done in the Middle East, which they've done in Thailand, because they want Ukraine on the EU system and they want Ukraine on NATO. Now, the Ukrainian government right now, again, we have to remember, let me just go back for a second here. If you recall, the new government in Ukraine was not elected. They did not hold elections at all. Now, why is that? Why wouldn't they open it up to the entire country? Because they were worried about the outcome of the elections, that the people that they wanted in power would not be in power. And this is why elections were called off. Right now, Ukrainian government wants to shut off 5 Russian TV channels by Tuesday evening. The National Television and Radio Broadcasting Council of Ukraine requires the Ukrainian providers to stop broadcasting Russian TV channels. Moscow has come out there and has repeatedly pointed out that the introduction of a ban on the broadcast of Russian channels in Ukraine would be a serious violation of freedom of speech. So, again, we see they don't want Ukrainian government right now. They don't want the people to hear certain channels, so they're just cutting them off. Now, Crimea at this point is introducing a declaration of independence. Yes, just like the United States did when it split apart from England. And right now, this declaration of independence was adopted during the session, during the talks. This document is needed for the judicial procedures as part of Crimea's entry into Russia, as well as for the Crimean referendum. A direct declaration of independence is an assertion of the independence of an aspiring state or states, usually breakaway territories from within the larger state. Now again, we've seen this happen with many countries. In the United States, we had the Declaration of Independence, which was in 1776. There was a Declaration of Independence of the Republic of Moldova, and this happened in 1991. In 2008, Kosovo, Declaration of Independence was adopted at that time in 2008, and in Palestine there was a Declaration of Independence, and that was with Yasser Arafat in November of 1988. So this is nothing new. We've seen this happen to many countries where they split apart and they create their own country, and this is the first step in doing this. Now, as we know, NATO, U.S., they're all holding military drills. More F-16s are being shipped to Poland and Lithuania. They have AWACS up in the air monitoring the whole entire situation. We have now Russia. Their paratroopers are holding a massive drill. Right now, it's the Defense Ministry said units of the 98th Guards Airborne Division were put on high alert and moved to unspecified locations to check readiness in a simulated combat condition. And again, of course, with all the countries, none of this has to do with Ukraine at all. And of course we know it does. And U.S. says the same thing. NATO says the same thing. All these drills were all scheduled. Everything was scheduled way ahead of time. And they're just all of a sudden having all these drills very close to Ukraine area. Now, the new Ukraine government is building a national guard. Ukraine will raise a new national guard force. They are doing this, and they're looking for military veterans to help out here. The acting defense minister said the country had only about 6,000 combat-ready infantry, and they need more people. So the goal of this National Guard would be to defend citizens from criminals and from internal or external aggression. And this is what they are looking to do at this time. Now, as we know with North Korea, they are on they have sanctions imposed upon them. And again, all these countries that have sanctions, they figured out a way to get around them. They barter, they use gold, they use other currencies, and they always seem to make it work. And right now, a new UN report has found that North Korea is managing to evade international sanctions. I don't find this as a big surprise because Iran has been doing it for many years, Cuba has been doing it for many years, and North Korea now. They just figured out, wow, they've been bartering, they've been using other currencies, they've been using gold to evade these sanctions. Well, of course they have, because the country will do what they have to do to survive, just like they have the North Korean oil tanker in the Libyan ports being filled up with oil. Again, these ships that are being filled up by the Libyan rebels or militia, which are not part of the Libyan government, are selling the oil not using the U.S. dollar. And right now, of course, the Libyan government does not like that because they are the puppet government of the central banker's U.S. government. And again, already from yesterday, they were going to start imposing sanctions and penalties on the militia rebels, but they don't really care because they're not using U.S. dollars, and if they're getting gold for this oil, they really don't care about it. Now, there are reports that this North Korean tanker has sailed off. It's in international waters, and the rebels say that they have escorted the tanker out of the port at 3 a.m. And during this time, it seems like the ship has been getting, away from the Libyan government, and right now there must have been a call that came in from the U.S. government central bankers to the puppet regime of the Libyan government and said, listen, you need to do something to stop this. This cannot happen. And all of a sudden we see the Libyan's prime minister was ousted on Tuesday, and the defense minister Abdallah al-Dahini was voted in, and now he is the new prime minister. And then all of a sudden there were reports coming in that the Libya Navy fired upon the North Korean ship with a missile and hit the ship, and it is on fire. Now again, this is an attack on North Korea. And I'm going to go back to what I've always said. The central bankers want war. They do not care how it starts, because we're going to have to see what the response is from North Korea. Because, again, if it was a U.S. ship and another country fired a missile into one of our tankers, pretty much it's an act of war. So we're going to have to see the response from North Korea at this time. And again, these central bankers, their end goal is to start war, to cover up this entire collapse that is coming. And again, we have to realize, if they decide to do something against Libya, the U.S. government is going to come to their aid. And again, we're going to see other skirmishes and other countries come in, and this is going to ignite World War III. So again, we have many different flashpoints occurring. We have Ukraine, we have Syria, we have Libya, we have the Japan-China skirmish going on with the provoking out that way. And we can see all of this has been set up to bring about war, to cover up this entire economic collapse. Now, the rebels, the Libyan militia, the new Libyan government that's going to be formed because they control most of the country, they're out there saying that Libya, we are ready to sell oil, and we're going to bypass this puppet government, and we are ready to start selling this oil from all the ports that we control. And again, I said this in the past, this is going to pose a problem, because if more and more oil tankers come in to purchase this oil and they are not using the US dollar, the central bankers are not going to have this. They will do something to create an incident where this war can start, and they have already done it with North Korea. And if there are more oil tankers that come in, they will push this agenda forward. They will not stop. This will not end. This is why you're seeing all of this around the world going on right now. Now, we understand that Crimea is having the referendum, and it's coming up soon. And there are reports now that the website of the Crimean referendum, which was Referendum 2014, is now being hit by cyber attacks, and they're saying the attacks are coming from the USA and Kiev, Ukraine. So they've repaired the website. It is back up and working now, but they're saying that the U.S. is now attacking Crimea in cyber attacks. Now, in my past reports, and we've discussed this many times, we understand that the government wants control of the Internet. They want all the information from the private corporations. They want everything. And we understand that the president has created this framework, and it's voluntary to all corporations right now to provide private information to the government, because the government wants all this information on every single person, your bank accounts, how you spend your money, your personal information that these companies have. They want it. And right now, because of this framework, the chairman, Michael McCaul, who is the U.S. House Homeland Security Committee chairman, has introduced H.R. 3696, the National Cybersecurity and Critical Infrastructure Protection Act of 2013. It amends the Homeland Security Act of 2002 to make improvements in how we protect our infrastructure from cyber terrorism, and the bill will establish a threat information sharing partnership between the DHS and the owners and operators of the nation's critical infrastructure systems. Because in America 95% of the cyber infrastructure is owned and operated by the private sector, the nature of this legislation requires that DHS will work collaboratively with the private sector to get all your information. This is the same as CISPA, this is the same as the Dianne Feinstein bill, and this is just another bill being introduced because they want this to happen. This is why all this has been set up. This is why the president went out and created these executive orders to support CISPA or bills of this type, because they want complete control of the Internet. They can't have people like myself and other people who talk about this out there talking about things that they have no control over. They have control of the corporate media. They have control over the money supply, but they do not have control over the Internet, and this is the thing that is lacking with them. Now, I talk a lot about cyber attacks and a power grid going down, and again, we've been hearing from government officials over the last 3 years that we're going to get hit with a cyber attack. And we understand that Janet Napolitano was out there before she left office. It's not if, but when. And now we have Leon Panetta out there again. And he was the former U.S. Secretary of Defense. And he is renewing the warning of a cyber Pearl Harbor attack. As the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Leon Panetta delivered strong warnings about the risks of cyber attacks on the country. His conviction that a possible cyber Pearl Harbor may be looming has not tempered since leaving the post last year. In fact, Panetta today said that the risk of a major cyber attack against the nation's infrastructure is the most serious threat in the 21st century. And he went on to say that the American people need to understand that this is not about hacking and identity theft. It has the potential for a major attack on the United States. And then there was a report that was released from the U.S. electrical grid, and this is coming out of New Jersey. The electrical grid compounds compounds across the country have faced an uptick in unauthorized intrusions by unknown individuals, causing concern that the U.S. grid is inherently vulnerable to widespread sabotage, according to a recent oversight report issued by New Jersey Regional Operations Intelligence Center, ROIC, which monitors the threat level. Now, what they're reporting here is something a little different than that's been reported, like, oh yeah, we get cyber attacks and nothing's happening. What they're saying right now is at least 8 reports of intrusions at electrical grid facilities in New Jersey from October 2013 to today have almost brought down the electrical grid. And it's showing them that the electrical grid is inherently vulnerable to attacks that could wipe out power across large swaths of the country. They're saying that 8 of them actually made it through to bring down the entire grid system. And the concern is that many of these incidents outlined in the ROIC report could be a sign that preparations are underway for a larger coordinated attack on the grid. The electrical grid, a network of power generating plants, transmission lines, substations, and distribution lines, is inherently vulnerable. The incidents of the grid tampering are not isolated to New Jersey. It could be all across the country, they're saying, and most of these centers are not reporting these attacks because they are afraid of letting this information out, and a lot of these attacks are getting very close to bringing down the system. And what the New Jersey ROIC report shows is that this fits into a larger pattern of incidents, which should be keeping someone at Homeland Security up at night, Poole said. The other big question is how many more of these incidents are going unreported. Again, they have built the propaganda up. They have had the drills, the Grid X drill. All of this is done on purpose because they have to understand exactly what they're going to do. If you remember, back before the World Trade Center was hit, there was a bomb in the basement, which was a test of how everything is going to work. In 2003, the power grid went out along the East Coast. This was a test. It wasn't a power line that went down that had a cascading effect and brought the entire grid down. That is absolutely ridiculous. These were tests because they are preparing for what is coming, because they understand the collapse is coming. They understand they need DHS. They understand people will be rioting because nobody is prepared in this country. And when I say nobody, I mean the majority of the people. Most of the people are completely sleeping. They have no idea what's going on. And again, we have so many indicators all around us. We have so many things going on around the world, and we realize they are going to actually bring this home because they need to get this war started before this collapse hits. And this is why everyone needs to be prepared. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.